In this video we're going to model a pipe that looks like this. So we have a straight pipe that branches off into two other pipes at the top at an angle of, in this case, 45 degrees. So what we need first of all is a cylinder. Actually we need two, so let's drag out a copy of this one. And I'm going to rotate one of these cylinders 45 degrees like this, and the other one I'm going to rotate minus 45 degrees. And I want these to be a little bigger, so I'm going to grab both of these, go back to the Object tab and change the height to something like, let's try 300. I'm going to keep the caps of these cylinders because we're going to use a bool object to combine these two cylinders, and the bool will just work better if we have closed geometry. There's one more thing I want to change, and that's the rotation segment, because we're going to be using a Subdivision Surface object to smooth the combined cylinders later on. We don't need that many rotation segments. So let's go ahead and change these to maybe 24. And now I'm going to add a bool object and make the two cylinders children of the bool object. And by default the bool object is set to A subtract B. So we need to change that to A union B. And make sure that high quality is checked. It is by default. And in this case I want to create a single object. So now we can hit C on the keyboard to make this object editable. And I'm going to rename this to 45 degree connection. And you can see the object axis of this new object is rotated by 45 degrees, so we have to fix that. Let's enable the axis, and all we need to do is change the angle back to 0. And now let's switch the axis off again, and let's go to point mode. And what I'm going to do is grab my rectangle selection tool. I have only select visible elements unchecked here, and I'm going to delete the bottom part of this object. And now let's go to edge mode and grab these edges down here. Hold down the control key and left click and drag on the y-axis, and let's extrude these down a bit. If you have a look at the bottom of this object here, you can see it's no longer circular, so we need to change that back to a circle. The original cylinders had a diameter of 100 centimeters, so we're just going to make these 100 centimeters in the x-axis as well. So hit apply, and we have our nice circular shape back. Now here in the front view, I want to move these edges back up again a little, because what I want is I want this edge here to continue straight down all the way to the bottom. So let's go ahead and move these up a bit, something like this. And now I'm going to extrude these down one more time, and we're going to do another extrusion and move these edges down to maybe about here. And we don't need the caps, so I'm going to select the points up here, and I'm going to delete these. So let's add a subdivision surface object, and I'm switching the display to isoparms, and as you can see the transition is very soft up here, and that means we have to add control edges to hold the shape of the original object. So let's go ahead and do that. Before I add the control edges, I'm going to delete most of the object here. So let's grab these points here and delete them, and in the top view I'm going to grab all of these points at the back and delete them as well. And now in edge mode I'm going to use my ring selection tool to grab these edges here, and then right click and select edge cut, left click and hold down your mouse button. You should get one subdivision by default. and by additionally holding down the control key and dragging the mouse left or right, you can slide these edges, and we're going to slide these down to about here. And now I want to change the flow of these edges a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the slide tool and slide each of these points here down a bit. So something like this. And we're going to do the same thing here. And here at the transition, I'm going to slide this point up a bit, and maybe let's go ahead and slide this one up a bit as well. Okay, so now we can add a symmetry object, and let's make this editable. And I'm going to tweak a few more points here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide the points up a bit like this, just to get nice and even quad shapes here. And this one here I'm going to slide up a bit as well. So let's see, maybe I'll bring this one down again a bit, like so. And with this done, we can now add another symmetry object, and for this one we have to change the mirror plane to X, Y. And let's make this one editable, and the basic shape is finished. So now all we have to do is add some thickness to this pipe. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to keep the base mesh and just make a copy of this one, and I'm going to switch the other object off. And there's two ways you can do that. We could just create some edges here to create the illusion of thickness, or we could do the entire inside of this pipe. So if you just want to create the illusion of thickness, which would be what you would usually go for, what you can do is close the polygon hole, like this one up here, and in polygon mode grab this n-gon here, right click and extrude inner, and let's do something like 9 or 10 centimeters, okay, something like this, and then right click, extrude this n-gon down a bit and just delete it. And then you would have to add control edges up here to hold the shape. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create the entire inside of the object. So the way to do that is by creating a copy of this one. Let's go back to model mode and hit T for scale, and we're going to scale one of these objects down a bit. And now we can grab the edges down here. Make sure you switch on snapping, because we need to snap these edges to the bottom edges of the bigger object. And up here, let's grab these edges, hit E for the move tool, and now we can left click and drag in a viewport anywhere, and we're going to snap these edges to here. And over here I'm going to move these and snap them to this point here. So we have everything lined up nicely. And there's one more thing we need to change before we connect these two objects. So let's go to polygon mode and select all of the polygons of the smaller object, and we need the normals that are facing outwards right now to face outwards the other way. So what I'm going to do is, let me switch off snapping here. I'm going to right click and select reverse normals. Okay, so now let's grab both of these objects, right click and select connect objects and delete from the menu here. And in edge mode I'm going to grab these edge loops here and these ones down here, and now we can use stitch and sew, hold down the shift key and left click and drag from any of these points up here down to a corresponding point here to close that hole. And now we need to add some control edges. So since we have all of the edge loops that we need already selected, we can go straight away to the bevel tool. So let's right click and select bevel from the menu here, and I'm going to do a solid bevel, and for the offset I'm going to use something like 2 centimeters. So let's hit apply, and I'm going to add a subdivision surface object, and let's do a quick render. And this is looking nice. So that's the end of this tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another tutorial soon.